forgive me. Trying to find getting myself all together here. I'll be reading out of the New King James Version today. Genesis 45:7. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by great deliverance. What does that sound like? Does it sound like Joseph? Well, yeah. But it also sounds like Jesus, doesn't it? So this is the second part of the sermon that I did a little while ago. And first time we talked about who are you? The question, who are you? And we focused that through Joseph, right? Who was Joseph? And throughout the sermon today, I want you to see if you can pick out any of the similarities, like Daniel said earlier, the similarities between Joseph and Jesus, because as you read through it, it becomes obviously clear there's many similarities. But got the papers backwards. Last sermon we talked about Joseph, his upbringing, who he was, right? What was he? He was a shepherd, he was the favored son, he was a chosen person by God, given the dreams, right? But was that who he is? Was that who he was? And he was more than that. Once he found himself being sold as a slave by his own family, Ellen White said that he decided to give himself fully to the Lord, his soul thrilled with the high resolve to prove himself true to God, under all circumstances to act as became a subject of the King of Heaven. He would meet the trials of his lot with fortitude and perform every duty with fidelity. Made me think of your talk just a minute ago. And you said how you were told to work like somebody's watching, right? Joseph, under all circumstances, was going to act as subject of the King of Heaven, no matter who was watching. But today, the second question is what we're going to be focusing on. Who's in control of your life? Who was in control of Joseph's life? To jump ahead a little bit, as the scripture pointed out, there is a happy ending to the story of Joseph. Yes, he was sold as a slave. Yes, things were looking really dark. But eventually he finds himself in a position where he is able to save not only the people of Egypt, but all of the people in that area. And in so doing, he gets in contact with his family again, and his dream that God gave him is realized. It's way in the future. But that's what will happen. Today we're going to focus on how he got to that point. We're going to look at the journey. In Genesis 39, verse 1, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. So now Joseph is purchased, he is a slave, and he is a slave to a captain of the guard. I don't know if you have much experience with family members who have been in the military, but that probably means he was gone quite a bit. And as we'll find out, he had a large estate. He needed some people to work that, especially while he's gone. And hence, this is why Joseph is there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. And he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did prosper in his hand. Notice here that his master saw that the Lord was with him. Now, how would he make that revelation? How would he come to that conclusion that the Lord was with him? Because remember, in Egypt, this was an idolatrous country. They had many gods that they believed in. How would they know? How would he know of Joseph's God? Unless Joseph was not afraid to share his faith. So Joseph is in this foreign land. He's a slave. There's all kinds of beliefs that are not in accordance with his own, and yet he is not afraid, not ashamed to show his faith with his Lord. And Potiphar acknowledges that. That's pretty good. That's something that I hope and I strive to do, is that through my interactions with the people that I'm around, that they may see the Lord because of me. I don't always succeed in that, but that's a goal. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. And then he, this being Potiphar, made Joseph overseer of his house, and all that he had, he put under his authority. Remember, we go back to Joseph's childhood. What was one of the jobs his father gave him? He was an overseer of his brothers, wasn't he? Matter of fact, that was the source of some of the contention that they had with him, because the younger brother was overseeing them, and sometimes he didn't bring back a good report about his brothers. But I think that helped to put him, give him the experience he would need at this point in time. He's now being put as the overseer of Potiphar's house and all that he had. And so it was from that time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus, he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Potiphar recognizes the blessing that Joseph is receiving, and he's noticing that he's himself being blessed through Joseph. And what does he do? Puts him in charge of the entire house, his entire property, his estate. It makes me think of the parable of the talents. The different people were given the talents, and for those who did the most, they were given more to be in charge of, right? Potiphar is now putting him in charge of his entire house, and he's being blessed for it. He's so successful. He is so, one of the words is, he's becoming so richly blessed that he doesn't even know what he has. He doesn't have to pay attention to it. He doesn't have to pay attention to his finances. He doesn't have to pay attention to the supplies in his house. All he has to worry about is walking over to the refrigerator and opening it up and seeing what he's going to eat that day, if they have a refrigerator. Right? What a life. His decision to trust Joseph with his entire estate has paid off handsomely. And speaking of handsomely, roughly 10 years goes by. Joseph is no longer a young boy. He's now a young man. And the woman of the house takes notice. Verse 6, now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph. And she said, lie with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, look, My master does not know what is with me in this house, and he's committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept anything back from me but you, because you are his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Joseph is put in a very precarious position. The woman of the house is now asking him to do something that goes against his own faith. And there's going to be consequences, no? What happens if he does what she says? It's going to be a constant worry. What's going to happen if Potiphar finds out? What if he doesn't do what she says, and he loses favor in the sight of his master, or his master's wife in this case? But those aren't the things that he's thinking about, is it? That last line, he says, how can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He doesn't say, how can I do this to Potiphar? He's focused on, how can he do this against God? So at the risk of his current wellness, I mean, things have been looking good for Joseph. He's been a slave for sure, but could be a lot worse. Now that's in danger. He refuses her advances. But does she let it go? So it was as she spoke to Joseph day by day that he did not heed her, to lie with her, or to be with her. So this is a daily struggle that he's being tempted with. But it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were inside, that she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. And I just can't get this image out of my head. Because I used to watch cartoons. And the cartoons, the character would try to run away as fast as they could, and they would leave, and all of their possessions would be left behind to show how fast they left. I kind of feel like Joseph is doing that here. Get away. When we're presented with temptation so overwhelming, so strong, run. It's okay. Just run. So we see here that there were other men that usually were about the house, right? This happened when the men were gone. Which means all of the other times that she's making her advances on Joseph, the men were there. Because this time it's different. Now this is just my speculation, I'm just reading into this, so it's not gospel or anything. But I have a feeling that this was a common occurrence that she did with the other slaves of the house. Because she was open about it. She didn't hide it from them. But this time it's different. And now she's frustrated. She's been turned down over and over and over. And the next few verses, she will accuse Joseph of being the one to make the unwanted advances towards her, and she has the cloak to prove it. So she brings that to Potiphar's attention, and many people believe, and so do I, Potiphar didn't believe her. Otherwise, he would have had her killed. Him. Would have had him killed, but instead, to save face, had him thrown into the prison where Pharaoh's his prisoners were kept. So Joseph goes from being sold as a slave, working up the ranks, being in charge of the entire estate, to once again being cast out into a prison. History is repeating itself. If you recall, his brothers took his garment from him and threw him in a pit. Many scholars think that this prison that Joseph was put into was underground, close to where the Pharaoh's palace was, since his prisoners were there. So once again, his cloak is being taken away. He's thrown into a pit. Does that change his resolve? No, it does not. Verse 21 through 23, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy. And he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison, and the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all of the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So, we have a new situation Joseph is found in. He's in a new adversity. He's now a prisoner, probably not treated very well, and yet he remains faithful to the Lord, acting as though he's a servant of the king. And the jailer, or the keeper of the prison, recognizes that just like Potiphar did. And whatever Joseph did prospered, to the point where he didn't have to worry about anything that happened in the prison. Joseph would take care of it. And it's in this capacity that Joseph comes across the butler and the baker of Pharaoh, who had gotten into some trouble, found themselves down in his prison. And he sees them all disappointed and sad, and he's ministering to their needs. He's a prisoner, and yet he's concerned about these other two prisoners and their well-being, and finds out that they're disturbed because they've had these weird dreams. And Joseph shares with them the interpretation that God gives to him of their dreams. One of them is going to be reappointed to his position, and one of them won't. But he tells the one that will, he says, please remember me to Pharaoh, in hopes that he'll be able to get out of this predicament. Time goes by, and then Pharaoh gets some dreams of his own. Now it came to pass in the morning that Pharaoh's spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all of its wise men. And Pharaoh told them of his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them for Pharaoh. And now the butler remembers Joseph. Oh, that's right, there was that guy in prison. He can tell what the dreams mean. And he brings it up to Pharaoh. And so Pharaoh, excited at this prospect of someone who's going to be able to explain these troubling dreams to him, summons Joseph from the prison to his attendants. So they clean him, they shave him, give him clean clothes, and they bring Joseph before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, this is chapter 41, 13 and 16. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. But I have heard it said that you can understand a dream to interpret it. So Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. But God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Joseph has an opportunity here to take credit for this feat that he's going to accomplish here. He's in prison. Wouldn't this be a great way to get out of prison, being able to give Pharaoh peace? But he doesn't take credit for it. Once again, he puts his faith in God on display for the pagan Pharaoh. Pharaoh tells him of his dreams, and Joseph gives him the interpretation. There's going to be 7 bad years. There's going to be 7 good years, plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. And he goes further and gives Pharaoh some advice on how to handle those 7 years of plenty, so that Egypt will be spared through those 7 years of bad times. So the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all of his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God?" That's Pharaoh that said that. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Inasmuch as God has shown you all of this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, over my people, and they shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." In just one conversation, in just one day, Pharaoh recognizes this relationship that Joseph has with God. And he can see the wisdom. And by the way, not just Pharaoh recognizes this, but his wise men that are in attendance, they also agree that the advice that Joseph gives is good. And Pharaoh bestows upon him the authority to oversee his entire country. The only thing he doesn't have authority over is Pharaoh himself. All my years reading this story, I always tell myself, we need to be like Joseph. I need to be like Joseph. No matter what adversity comes my way, no matter what hardship comes my way, I need to remain faithful and be a good example of my Lord to those around me. And I still recommend that. But like any really great story that I like, there's an unexpected twist here at the end of this sermon. What if I told you that you should be like Potiphar, or the jailer, or even Pharaoh? Remember Joseph's similarities with Christ. Many people believe that Joseph was a type of Christ, and he wanted to show us what Christ was going to be like later on. They both came from non-traditional families. Joseph had multiple mothers. Jesus had multiple fathers. Both were shepherds. Joseph was a literal shepherd, and Jesus is a figurative one. Both became servants, and both were falsely accused. And yet both became saviors to all people. Because remember, during those years of famine, it wasn't just a famine of Egypt, it was a famine of the whole land. And all of the other countries would come to Egypt to buy food. And so through Joseph, not just Egypt was saved, but all the land of that area. Potiphar appointed Joseph in control of his home and his fields, and he was blessed. I want to appoint Jesus in control of my home. I don't have any fields, but if I did, I would appoint him in charge of those too. The jailer appointed Joseph in control of his workplace, and he was blessed. I want Jesus to be in control of me and my work. And Pharaoh appointed Joseph in control of his entire kingdom. And his entire kingdom was blessed. So likewise, how will we be blessed if we appoint Jesus in control of our home, of our work, and our entire livelihoods? By the way, Potiphar did not put Joseph in control of everything in his home. And the one thing he didn't have control of was what ultimately separated him from Joseph. Likewise, Pharaoh didn't put him in control of everything. And later on, a new Pharaoh would undo everything, that whole relationship that Joseph and his people had with Egypt. So don't hold anything back. Don't hold anything back. Get in control of everything. Who is in control?